I do. So, obviously, for those that know, I recently released a video, the ultimate animation workflow for beginners. Wow, so good. And look at this, it got fucking great views. So thanks everyone. And basically, I wanted to go a bit more in depth with it, talk about some stuff that I didn't necessarily get to cover very well. And yeah, and just go in depth with it. You guys can watch and follow along with the workflow as I do it. I'm going to pull up the flowchart here that I made, talk about all the points, go through it, and also answer any questions for you guys. Someone asked, where do you teach? Well, if you want to learn from me, you can now pay for me on Ko-Fi here to give you live animation reviews where I send you videos of me critiquing your animation and give lots of in-depth feedback and that sort of thing. So I will post that in chat. You can have a look at it. Great stream, gotta go. Bye. Thanks, Owen. Thanks, bro. Thanks for your help with those settings. That might have fixed it. It was just super delayed. Cool. So, as I said, we're going to go over that workflow and we're going to answer questions as we go. So, here we go. We got Stuart in a scene and I've got a couple poses. So, we're basically just going to go through the workflow that I've been showing and teach it. I do have some tools that aren't free, like Animbot here, but everything that I do in Animbot is doable without Animbot. Almost all of it. It's just kind of slower. That's how I always view it. So, basically, I'm just going to go between a couple poses. But first, I'm going to talk about posing a little bit. Not necessarily posing in itself, but posing in relation to other poses and how that fits with this workflow. One quick thing. This is a workflow. There are lots of valid workflows. I personally think this one's really good for beginners because it's based on 2D animation and you view every frame as like a drawing and it's just like a flat thing on your screen and you go between it. I think it's way easier to understand than fiddling with the graph editor and fiddling with lots of technical things. There are quicker ways of doing certain things that you can do in this, which I'll be showing this workflow, but don't worry about that for now. When you get good, you can skip over some of these things because you'll have quicker ways of doing it. But when you're starting out, it's very good to be conscious about all the decision making and you'll see how using this workflow, you make lots of decisions as you work. That's basically the whole point of it. During these steps, you have to ask yourself questions and then you go like that. But of course, there are lots of great workflows. I don't necessarily always use this workflow for every kind of shot. I switch up depending on the type of shot. Yeah, Penguin, how's it going? So yeah, the first thing we're going to talk about is our golden poses, what I'm calling golden poses in the video. So I call them golden poses, but they're often also called key poses. I just find calling them key poses a bit confusing because in 3D animation or computer animation of any kind, we call, basically when you set any key, this is a key frame. So calling it a key pose can get quite confusing for beginners. That's why I'm calling them golden poses, which they're sometimes referred to. But golden poses and extremes are kind of key poses, like that's kind of how it is. So I'm sometimes for these poses I may say key poses, I may say golden poses, I may say extremes, but all of those in this workflow are the same thing. All of them are just held poses. Anything that you hold is a golden pose or a key pose or any of those things. So just some terminology, some clarification. Cool. So the first thing you want to be looking out for when you're doing this is making sure that you have contrast between your poses, right? So these two poses I've made before stream here, they have some contrast in different ways. One thing that I look out for always is the spine shape. So this spine is kind of a reverse C, so it's this way. And when we go to the next pose, we're kind of going into a little bit, I could push it a little bit more. We're kind of reversing the spine this way. And this causes contrast, right? So this is one way of which you can cause contrast. And there's a bunch of other ways you can cause contrast. You can contrast like the silhouette and like how much space this fits within. So if we really wanted to contrast between two poses, I could go from a pose like this to a pose where it's like this, you know, and he's within this space, and maybe we'll do that afterwards. And yeah, there's a lot of different things you can contrast, but it's good, you know, even if you're copying reference or using reference as a base, it's good to try and push some of these things like the spine shape, like where they fit within a silhouette, like if you put a box around it, how much contrast there is between each of your key poses, their screen space, the twist in different body parts. There's loads of things you can contrast, right? So that's something we're looking out for. Another thing we're looking out for is anticipation, right? This is at this stage. So between these two moves, do I need to anticipate? I can. It would probably be good if I did. And then basically, if I am to do that, is the anticipation going to be another pose which is held? Is it another held pose, or is it a straight up like breakdown? You know, is it just something that's in the spacing of the breakdown that's going in the opposite direction, kind of anticipating, but it's part of the same move. It's not a held pose. If not, then we put that into the workflow going between this is pose A and this is pose B. Hopefully that's somewhat clear. Sometimes it can get a bit confusing when you add elements of anticipation into breakdowns versus an anticipation pose. These are separate things. C shape is pog, Owen. You are correct, my friend. Cool. So for now, let's add an extra pose in here. That's going to be an anticipation pose, right? So let's just, I'm just going to go up to frame 40. We'll just put it on every 20 frames for now. That's fine. We can pull up Twin Machine since it's the free version, and we can use this. So I'm going to mostly bias my previous pose, and this is going to serve as a base for the anticipation pose, right? I did this first just so that every controller is moving at least a little bit, and now I can build the anticipation pose on top of it. So when anticipating, I probably don't want to move my weight over or lift this leg. So maybe just to anticipate, I can go in the opposite direction. So maybe I can anticipate up this way before going this way. This also means that I'm putting my weight on my left leg here, which allows the right leg to lift off the floor. So you're seeing how when I'm doing this, I'm putting in elements of, you know, body mechanics that I understand into the workflow, right? So the better you get and the more you understand about body mechanics, you can put those things into the workflow, and you'll see that constantly in everything I do. So let's just do this anticipation pose like he's looked this way and he's shocked. We're not going to make the most beautiful poses in the world because we don't have time. We're going to be really quick with this. And something maybe to contrast, you know how we talked about the overall shape that he fits within, to contrast this and the next pose, which is something like this. Maybe to contrast it, we can make the anticipation kind of taller and thinner. So it's a box like this, which is taller and thinner within the other box that we have. A lot of scribbles on the screen, but maybe that makes sense to do with the point of contrast that we were talking about already. So I'm not thinking too much about lead and follow and this sort of thing yet. I'm just thinking about contrast between the poses and anticipation. Hey, Chester, I was trying to use a workflow. I have a small question. I got told that everything moves at the same time. How do I deal with that? Right, well, that's going to come when we start pushing the lead and follow a little bit more. So that's something, yeah, we'll definitely be getting into that. Also, I need to figure out what axes of these arms are going on. So forearms, when you're using FK arms, should only rotate in one axis, and I think I'll use rotate Y on both arms for that. Cool. So for this anticipation, we can bring him in. Maybe he can come down, and then he can step over. So he's seen something, he's noticed it, he's kind of, and then he can go into the next pose. So now we have 3 poses, and we're going to use our whole workflow here to go between each of these poses, right? Kind of makes sense. Because this is a held pose, this middle anticipation, we're going to go use our workflow to get into this pose, and then out of this pose into this kind of scared, shocked, like, ooh, defensive pose that we've got here. Not the best poses in the world, but they're fine. They're fine. Cool, maybe we can contrast and push the shape, C shape a bit more, reverse C shape in here. Oh my God, hi, hey, how's it going? And maybe we can tuck his head in for contrast here. Maybe we can straighten his head out this way. Just thinking about it. Another thing I did to do with mechanics for this is when I moved his weight over, I counted in rotation a little bit back, just so that the head spacing doesn't move too far to the right. Human beings are kind of like chickens, where you move a chicken and their head stays completely still. Human beings do that like 15%, so we do it a very little bit. And there's a great video by Owen Fern in chat. Owen Fernie in chat has made a great video about headspace and C-shape in the spine, so definitely watch that one. Shout out Owen Fernie. We need to get him monetized on YouTube. Cool, so that's our anticipation pose, and this is our next pose. So now let's start doing the actual workflow into these poses, right? So our first step of the workflow is our first breakdown, our breakdown 1, which is biasing our pose A. So the thing that we're considering when we first use Twin Machine to create a base for this is the further we bias the pose A when we come out of it, the snappier the movement in the middle of our 2 breakdowns is going to be. So for this first one, I think it's relatively casual. He's kind of half looking over, and then he's going to be shocked and go faster, right? So we're going to contrast our spacing by starting off with a small one and then going big. And for now, let's just do it on 4 frames. Let's maybe start with 10 frames where he's doing nothing, and then we can go 4 frames for our first breakdown. So I'm going to have it relatively casual here, maybe What's this one do? 33. So it's somewhat casual here. This is like not super snappy spacing. This is something in the middle. So now we've created a base for this, and we have two things we need to do. We need to first decide something that's leading this action, and second, we need to decide, well, we need to put arcs into everything we're doing, right? Do I work for space switching? I do in a lot of cases, but for this workflow, there's not much space switching involved, no. So let's choose something to lead. So I'm going to lead with the head. So the head is going to get around there first. The head and even the eyes, maybe. Or maybe the eyes can do a little blink as he turns. Maybe that could be cool. So we're leading with the head. So I've made a decision here. The head is really ahead of everything else in its spacing and its trajectory that it's going to be taking. And maybe we need to put everything else into arc. So I'm going to nudge this down a little bit. So now it's got a little arc to it. Maybe this can drag behind a little bit as well. It's a lie to say we're not thinking about drag as we're doing the first breakdown, but it's sometimes easier to break apart those things and think about it as just lead for the first one and just drag for the second one, because everything's kind of dragging by default when you use the left side of the Tween machine. That's just kind of how it goes. Cool, so we've decided the head is leading. I'm going to keep the foot planted for this move. I put the cog in arc, but we've done that in translation, but not rotation. So the rotation's not really moving much. If I made it really big, you might be able to see it moving a little bit. It's going in a little straight line here, so I might just nudge it out to the side a little bit just so we get a little arc in the rotation. So I'm looking at this intersecting point right here, so we get a tiny arc. And let's maybe put this is going to be going in a straight line, so that's maybe, I'm looking at the intersecting points when I'm doing the arms, but I'm also looking at the hand position. There's two things I'm looking at. So maybe we can arc around this way, and we can create the intersecting point here, doing a little arc this way for this move. And that could be interesting maybe. And then this arm is also in a straight line. So everything gets put in a straight line as soon as you use. This is what the thing I was talking about in that video, right? Everything gets put in a straight line when you use Tween Machine to start off. Maybe we could lead with his weight kind of leaning over and then coming back on itself. That could be interesting. Cool. So that's our first breakdown. It's done. Done, done, done. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to go 4 more frames up. And since there's only 2 frames here, I'm going to go 2 more frames to set a key. So that this pose is 4 frames apart. They're all 4 frames apart. So one other thing I talked about in the video is how if you space your keys evenly for each pose-to-pose move, it's way easier to flick between those frames and see the spacing changes that are happening. If they're on random frames, it's way harder to flick between frames and see like how far something is moving, because you can't mentally keep track of how far things are moving versus, you know, when you're flicking between stuff. Like that's something you need to pay attention to. If we are doing continuous animation, let's say fighting animation, Kung Fu move, what changes should we do in this workflow to make it work? So that's something this workflow is a bit weaker at, for sure. But basically it means that you just need more poses, more of your held poses. You just have to view those holds as very small. As something is maybe changing direction, then something needs to ease in and ease back out. That's that point where it hits its extreme on the side, is where you'd put that key. A little bit later in this demonstration, we're going to talk about how we use reference with this workflow. It is a little bit limited. I do use other workflows when I'm using a bit more of a reference heavy approach, but you can still use this workflow for sure. So we're going to go into that. What key poses are in an acting shot? Yep. That's also, look at this. You guys are ahead of the game. Where is my sheet? Look at this, using reference with workflow. Ignore this part about watching Owen Fern's video on reference. We don't need to worry about that yet. So we're going to go into that later, where we're finding our held poses, we're finding our extremes and that sort of thing. But for now, we're going to go through the normal workflow, and then we're going to get onto that stuff. So stick around, guys. We'll get to that stuff, I promise. Cool. Second step. Well, third step. We've made our key poses. We've made our first breakdown, which biases the left side. And now we're going to make our second breakdown, which biases the right side. And by right side, I mean it biases our second pose. So the first breakdown determines how we get out of the first pose, and the second breakdown determines how we get into the next pose. So let's do that. So I think I was around 40 or 50 in here. Like it was relatively smooth through the middle, not super snappy. And we were leading with the head. So I'm just going to carry on the arc of the head here. So once again, we're thinking about arcs, and we're also going to think about things that are dragging. So what can we drag? Maybe what would be interesting to drag is this arm a little bit. Maybe I can make this a bit smaller. It's a bit huge right now. So maybe since we were doing the spacing of that arc going around that way, we can continue that and continue to delay this arm. Obviously, I don't want it intersecting with the leg, so I need to find a balance. So maybe this arm is something that's dragging, right? So I've chose something now which is leading, and I've chose something which is dragging. I'm just making that arc go around. So that has a big spacing in here. That's fine though. Cool. This arm is now in a straight line between these poses. Everything's in a straight line because we've hit Tween Machine, right? You can see that this intersecting point is going in a very straight line. So we can just nudge that into an arc. Cool. We've already nudged the head into an arc. We can look at the body as well. The body was kind of dragging. We kind of made that decision already. Now it just pops over. So if I use my 2D pan zoom, which is the backslash key by default, and then right click to zoom and middle mouse to move around, you can flick between zoomed in versions. That's something that's very useful in Maya. So let's focus on this arc in here. So I'm just going to push that under arc here. Maybe it can be delayed a little bit during this breakdown, so it still has a little bit far to go, which is fine. The foot was also kind of delayed, so maybe we can even just use Tween Machine and delay a little bit. It's still moving a tiny bit, but yeah, that's all good. Cool. And the rotation on here we've not looked at. So let's make this really big and look at the rotation. So I'm keeping track of everything. So here maybe we can arc it around this way before coming back this way, which is cool. I haven't even looked at the chest really. I mean, the chest is just following the body. It's nice to break that up as well. So even though I didn't think about it too much at this stage, it's perfectly fine to do it at a later stage. I'm just going to put this into an arc. That's fine for now. So it's kind of arcing under and around this way. Like that's fine. And maybe we haven't even really thought about the shoulders. So the more complex the rig, the more things there are to think about as you're working, right? So maybe we can delay the shoulders up and then they can come down and then eventually maybe catch back up. Maybe they can overshoot at a certain point and then catch back up. But for now, it's fine. Right, so now we've made our second breakdown here. One thing that I'm not really looking at is the head spacing is kind of awkward here, and that's because I haven't thought about rotate Z in here. So let's maybe continue him going to the right, and then he can come back on himself. Cool. So we've got our two breakdowns. Nice. Did I do the head arc in here? I guess a little bit, but maybe I can overshoot it more around. So the overshoots, I'm not doing like an overshoot pose. You can do that if it's super cartoony, but the overshoots are just kind of how the spacing goes past the poses we're making. And the more info that we add in here, it's going to make things less poppy because we're going to add more keys to describe all the different parts moving at once. Cool. I find this workflow really powerful for imaginative pieces, I guess. Yeah. It's also, it can be used for stuff with reference as well, which we're definitely going to get into. The workflow seems like it needs at least 8 frames between poses. Well, I mean, you can animate on ones and you can have less info, right? You could just have 2 breakdowns if it was really snappy, and you could just be on ones. Like, it depends on the motion. Really depends on everything. Subtle motion is hard. Yeah, subtle motion with this workflow is definitely hard. That's where I would use more graph editor and that sort of thing. But for beginners, you can still use this workflow. It's a good starting point. Cool. So we've made our 2 breakdowns, and hopefully everyone's followed along with the steps so far. The next thing we're going to do is make our midpoint, which is our fastest point. So because this is between our 2 breakdowns, which are how you get out and how you get into a pose, what we're going to determine now is the fastest point for the middle. So the timing of this already kind of feels okay to me. The head spacing here is kind of crazy, but we'll figure that out when we add more breakdowns. So what I can do is I can continue to put this on 4s by moving this up a couple frames, so that I have 4 frames free in the middle for the midpoint. Or if I really wanted to, I could put the midpoint in between these 2 poses. That's something I didn't cover in the other piece, but it depends how fast you want to go through the middle. You can kind of determine that by where you put the midpoint. If you put it like in between these, or if I add more space, you'll be able to see that there's more keys on either side. Like this is on 4s. Actually it's on 3s, but if I went one more frame, this would now be on 4s. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's actually 1 frame short. Okay. So if I wanted to put the midpoint here, we can do that as a starting point, and then we can retime afterwards, I guess. So let's just smack the midpoint around the middle, which is fine, whereas it needs to be. Although, yeah, it might end up being a bit too linear through the middle. So again, for a move like this, I might choose to just put those keys closer together, which is breaking one of the rules I was saying, but that's part of animation, baby. You got to break everything. And basically at this point, we're just continuing our lead and follow. So maybe we can make this nice and snappy and have his eyes break down already into this. We can have his head already getting to that overshoot point of this arc. And start to change direction. That's cool. We can look at the body. You can look at the arc of the body in translation. Cool. So between these two now, it's going to be in a straight line. So I'm going to have to put it into an arc. So I just translate it down a little bit. And what I'm doing is I'm using middle mouse. And you can put your mouse anywhere and just use middle mouse. And it will select this middle guy here. Or if you have one of these selected, it will use the last selected thing. But if you double press W, it resets to the manipulator again. So that's what I always do. Cool. So this sideways momentum feels a little bit slow through the middle. So I'm kind of tracking my spacing as I do this. Like I'm making sure that it's getting bigger through the middle and then slowing down as we go, which is cool. We can look at the rotation as well. And it's really small, but that's fine. We can check this guy. Boom. Okay. Maybe we can arc the other way just so that we have a bit more space to move within. Doesn't need to be perfect. You can always clean this up in the graph editor afterwards, but it's good to get like a good base. Cool. Cool, so we got him looking, and we got different parts breaking up. We haven't dragged the arm yet, so I'm going to do that. The arm, we're using the Z, so maybe I can drag that hand back, put this in arc, and it can come around. So you can see how one thing's leading and the other thing's kind of dragging by going behind. This arm's going to be in a straight line between this pose and this pose. Right, so I need to put that into an arc. Maybe we can go under here and arc it around. Sorry, I'm not able to check chat whilst doing this. We'll do most of the demo stuff and then get more into questions afterwards, I think. I think that's going to be way easier. So maybe I can delay the hand here. Drag the hand behind and then start to catch up. Cool. Cool. Nice. So now we've kind of made the midpoint pose, right? So if you follow along with the video, you know that the next thing is a bigger step. And what we're doing is we're just padding out before and after our breakdown 1 and 2. We're going to pad out eases to describe the motion more, how we get out of the pose and how we get into the pose. And with those, we're going to put everything into arc and we're going to push our lead and follow just like we've done for everything else. What viewer did I use for the PDF? Well, this is Miro. This is where I made the PDF. So the PDF look I uploaded is, I think it just opens in Chrome automatically. But you have to download it, I think, and then in PDF viewer you can zoom in closer, I think. Cool. All right, I don't know if there's anything else in chat that I've missed. But we'll keep going. We'll add eases. And we're going to get faster and faster as we go when I don't have to explain as much. And we'll get between these poses nice and snappy. Cool. So since we're on 4s, let's push everything up 4 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to add another ease out. 1, 2, 3, 4 in here. So let's ease it back. The head was leading, which is cool, but it needs to be put into an arc. And maybe I want that blink to be nice and snappy, so I'm going to delay the eyes more so that they kind of just pop under. Cool. But everything else is not an arc. So this is kind of where we want to, like, you're adding a bit of polish in early here. Like I could add arcs to everything, or I could just leave it because we've already kind of defined an arc. But for this workflow, I think it's good to add arcs to everything. So I'm going to go behind our first pose here, and you can start to see how I'm adding an arc that goes around this way, right? Cool. So the arc is going back on itself. We can also look at the rotation. The rotation is so small at this point, it's kind of pointless, but I'll nudge it a tiny bit to the side because I know kind of the direction the arc is going in. And I can kind of follow along with it, which is cool. And then anything else that needs tweaking? I mean, the arms are definitely not going to be in arc right now. I mean, it's going to be going in a straight line. Like here, you can see that's going in a straight line. So, I mean, I can nudge it into an arc. So we're just kind of putting everything in arcs. This is going to be going in a straight line. So I know that's delaying. So maybe I can start the arc further back. Or actually, we're going over with the arc here. Okay, so I'm just going to continue, start that arc by going over and around like that. Cool. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So depending on the move, we may need to add more eases, but for this move, I think we've added enough ease outs. It's already slow enough, and we've already determined what's leading and what's following and how we're breaking up. What the biggest part of things that are missing right now is how we're getting into this last pose. So this is where we're going to need some eases. So I'm going to go 4 frames up and set a key, which copies this key to here because we're in stepped or constant in Blender. And now we're going to start making our ease ins, right? So this is after our breakdown 2, going into our final pose. And we're going to determine how we get into that final pose and add arcs to everything. Can I start a breakdown at the midpoint? Yeah, that's the conventional way of working. Most people start by adding a breakdown at the fastest point in the middle. The reason I don't recommend doing that is because it's easier to figure out how to get out of a pose and into a pose than randomly what's in the middle of it. Maybe if you've got reference or something, you can do that, but I just find it way clearer and simpler to teach to do it that way. That's the way I do it. Cool. So this breakdown, we've made it, but everything's in a straight line, right? So we've made this ease, but everything is in a straight line. So once again, we need to add arcs to everything. So let's look at the body. This is going in a straight line, so I'm going to continue the arc kind of past the final point in X, and it's kind of working its way around into this final pose. Cool. And in rotation, it's so subtle that it doesn't matter too much, but it's kind of hitting here and then coming back, so we can continue it this way and have it kind of go over, I guess. So I don't mind too much about changing the arc, and the arc might be a bit big at times because if it's subtle, it doesn't need to be this big, but you can always turn that down after the fact in the graph editor. We're just adding a slight arc to things. Cool. The head. So the head's in a straight line here. So I'm going to continue. We can come back on ourselves, boom, and then continue it, or maybe under and around. So the arc is continuing and settling this way, if you see. So the arc is kind of doing this and it's settling around. So all these arcs are kind of getting into position and slowly kind of doing stuff. Do you have a Discord where people can read out to you? Like questions? We could do that. Or reach out, sorry. There's a thing in the way on my screen, this heart, which is really annoying. Maybe I can remove the heart. Or not. Okay, I can't do that. I don't know why. Reach out to me. Not massively. I don't really have a Discord. Maybe I need to make one at some point, huh? That would probably be smart. Cool. So we did the head arc. Now let's do the arm. We know the arm is delayed, but right now it's in a straight line. So between these, because we've just pressed Twin Machine, everything is just in a straight line. And you can see how these steps are kind of getting repetitive. Like we kind of are starting to get it, hopefully. You can kind of start to see how it's repetitive steps, but you put your animation knowledge into it. So here, maybe I'll delay the arm even more. And maybe this is a bit too delayed now, so maybe I can get that forearm to start to come around a bit more. Cool, and you can see how we're adding more and more breakup, the more keys we're adding, hopefully. So this is in a straight line. Let's add it into an arc. And you can see how different pieces are moving at different times. One thing I haven't thought too much about is the Z on the overall body and the spacing of the head. I'm just going to do a quick pass on that. I think maybe here it's could go a bit further and then start to come back. Just so that overall head positioning, which is determined by the kind of overall weight underneath it, can be adjusted. Cool, so that's one pose-to-pose move. We can add more eases if we want to. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But for now, I think that's kind of one pose-to-pose move looks cool. And now what we're going to do is kind of work from this pose-to-pose move into the next pose-to-pose move, which is going to be a lot snappier. So we're going to contrast it by being snappier. Ooh, Chester, you offer reviews on your Ko-Fi page. Yes, I do, sir. Thank you very much for reminding me. And once again, I will link the Ko-Fi page. If you're interested in learning from me and want reviews, you can get reviews from me on Ko-Fi. Here's a link. Look at Peter being a great guy. What a great fella. There you go. Awesome. All right, so we're going to go between these two poses. So remember, what are the first things that we're going to do? Also, wait, I'm going to check my checklist to make sure I've not missed anything. We talked about anticipation a little bit. We talked about how using this workflow, you're basically putting your understanding of mechanics into it. We talked about lead and drag as we went. How to push the lead and follow. That's kind of hopefully intuitive to this workflow. You just exaggerate how much something is leading versus something else. And you can also lead it earlier during the earlier ease outs of your first pose for the lead, and you can drag things more as we've done here. Building overshoots as eases. So yeah, we talked about this a little bit, but overshoots in this workflow are just parts of the body that are getting past the final pose and then coming back, right? So You don't need like a whole pose, which is an overshoot pose. Like, woohoo. Like if something was super cartoony, maybe. But things are a bit more organic. Things are going to overshoot at different times. Things are going to arrive at the final pose at different times. So it's not super... It's basically just you're building them into the eases and breakdown 2. Or even breakdown 1 if you're super snappy, you know, or the midpoint, whatever really. Hopefully you can see that. So there's a little bit of weirdness with the head here, which I could fix up. I've not really paid any attention to the Z rotation on the head, but maybe I could delay it a little bit in here. I'm just looking at this line now. This is going to determine our spacing. I mean, I could look at the graph editor as well, but that need to make sure that we're continuously moving this way into our final pose where we're easing in here. Cool. So we got our first pose-to-pose move. Is there anything else? Continuous action. This is the thing that I didn't cover in the video, which I really want to talk about. This is where you spice up these pose-to-pose moves and make them way more interesting. So we're going to talk about that. But that's kind of built into the eases of the next pose-to-pose. But because in the video I only covered one pose-to-pose move instead of multiple, we didn't get into that. So we'll start this pose-to-pose move and then I'll talk about what I'm calling continuous action in a second. Cool, so we're going to go into this pose and we've already sort of talked about how we want it to be snappy. So let's, instead, maybe we can do the midpoint. We can animate on 2s for this part. And because we want it to be snappy, we can bias the first pose a lot more this time. So last time it was relatively continuous in action, like they were relatively smooth, and this time we're going to be snapping into the pose. Will the stream be recorded? Yes, it will. You should have access to the stream straight afterwards because YouTube automatically uploads it to the channel. And maybe I'll edit it into a second part of my video as well. Cool, so we want to talk about things leading because we're in our first breakdown here. We've just made our first breakdown base using Tween Machine. We didn't need a moving hold because we had enough eases to cover the space between the two poses. So we're just going to go back to the start here. So breakdown 1, spicing our left side. We chose that this move's going to be super snappy. And yeah, we're going to choose what's leading the action and put everything into arcs. So let's think what would be interesting to lead this action. You know what would be interesting is using what we're calling continuous action. So because this arm is still catching up here, maybe what would be interesting is that arm is now the thing which led the next action. So it was delayed in the first action, but it continued through our pose-to-pose move and became the thing leading the next action, right? So let's try that out. Let's do a breakdown. So it's kind of, it goes out on itself, but this part of the arm comes up, right? Or whatever part of the arm. What controls have I used? Okay, that's fine. So we can blend between our two pose-to-pose moves, and the arcs here are going to get a bit funky because I've kind of gone back on myself, but maybe we can find a way of making this arc nicely. Cool. That's in his body now. So I'm not looking at this too much. I'm looking at the hand positioning. So maybe the arm can lead it this time. So it was delayed before and now it's leading. And maybe that means we can lead more with this shoulder than the other shoulder as well. So that can be something that's leading. Cool. And the foot as well. The foot was kind of slowly picking up during this part. It's not really in an arc right now, like the heel is just going in a straight line, which I want to fix. And also we can kind of lead with it. So maybe we can lead and delay the toe. And this one we can start to do that a little bit as well. So we're kind of blending between our previous ease in and then our way snappier breakdown 1 on our next pose. So you can start to see how we're kind of breaking apart the pose-to-pose method and like layering things in. And maybe the head could be delaying this time, right? So the head arc is continuing. A head arc is going around this way, and eventually it will start to come down again. But maybe for this, it could be interesting if the head arc is still kind of going up during this part, and the body below it is what's leading it. So it might be a bit more interesting. This might be a bit more cartoony, but it could be cool. So we've chose 2 things to lead, and we need to make sure everything else is in arc. So the body I haven't touched, and that's definitely not going to be an arc right now. So the body was kind of delayed before, so we're just going to continue the arc around that we had from the first move. So you're seeing how using this pose-to-pose method, we're kind of blending the pose-to-poses together. so that it doesn't go from one pose into a pose and then another pose into a pose. We're blending things from one pose to pose into the next, and things are leading out of it, and you can start to get things more and more organic as you go. Cool. So this body, maybe we can delay the, let's go, maybe we can delay the rotate Z, the overall body, and start to come back on ourselves afterwards. Maybe we can delay the neck and then start to come back on ourselves. And then this arm isn't an arc yet. So we can put that into an arc. I'm just looking at the hand. Sometimes looking at this can solve these issues, and sometimes you just need to look at like what the rotation is controlling. So here I'm just looking at the hand. Cool. I've really not focused on the chest here. At some point I probably should do a pass on the chest, like the chest is not been touched. It's going to be very not in arc right now, but that's fine. We can clean that up afterwards. Cool. So we've made our first breakdown here where we've decided what's leading, and we've added arcs to everything. So now we're going to make our second breakdown. We've also implemented continued action. So we've had things from the previous move continue into this move, so that things don't feel too pose to pose and start and stoppy. So hopefully someone did ask earlier, how do you make things feel like they're arriving at different times or more organic? And that's how you do it, right? You break it up by having things arrive in that pose at different times. Cool. So we're still on twos. We're just going to go 2 frames, and we're going to bias the hell out of the next pose because we're going to be snappy. So we're going to really snap through the middle of this. We're going to be slow through here and then snap in to this part. Cool. So we know what's leading already. We can exaggerate that. We can push that, but we need to determine something that is dragging if we look at this step. So what is dragging? And then we also need to put everything in arcs. So we already kind of decided when we were doing this that the head was going to be dragging. So the body was going to move below, and then the head was going to be going in. So let's delay the head. I can delay the head in rotation. I can delay the head's position based using the neck. I can also delay the head's position using the chest rotation. So it's kind of a combination of lots of things. So this is going to be very cartoony, a very cartoony move. I don't want it to feel too disconnected from the neck, so maybe I'll use the Z here, and we can break down into it. It's going to be kind of a fun little move here. It might be a bit pushed, but it's going to be fast, so we can be a bit more cartoony, you know? And maybe we can blink during this part. Or maybe we can even delay the eyes and stretch the eyes out as we move between these poses. Okay, cool. So now we need to put everything into arcs. This guy was leading before, so I definitely want to have it kind of overshoot at this point and then come back. But we want to make sure that overshoot is an arc. It doesn't just go straight up and down. So maybe I'll push it in so it kind of arcs around this way. Cool. And the hand can maybe be a bit delayed. Maybe the hand can be a bit delayed in here. I don't want it to feel too broken, but we can add a little bit of breakup in there. Cool. The cog was kind of delayed. It does a huge spacing jump here. So we can look at this arc and maybe find a nice point in this arc that's working. We're doing an over arc apparently. Maybe we can do an under arc. We can go over and then under. That's fine. Maybe we can delay it a little bit. So the head spacing is going way too left and right here. So maybe we need to help this out by using the rotation to clean this head spacing up. Cool. The chest we already did because we were determining the head. This arm here we've not really touched. I kind of want to delay it a bit compared to the other arm, so let's do that. Yeah, I'm using rotate Y on this arm. That's cool. So we can delay this arm so it arrives after the other arm. That's fine. And maybe we can overshoot this arm even more to push the lead and follow. So you can see how hopefully you can see how I'm using the workflow and how I'm breaking things up. Maybe the shoulder can overshoot here and then come back down. And this shoulder is still yet to overshoot, so we get a little bit of breakup between the two arms. I feel like this Z here is a little bit broken, so let's just clean that up a little bit. I just want to make sure that the spacing is kind of working. Cool. So we don't have enough information in here yet. This is going to be very confusing for now. One thing we haven't touched is the foot. So the foot was leading. So maybe we can get the foot there. We can get the toe there, but we were delaying the heel, right? So maybe we can get the foot there, but delay the heel. So I'm going to line up the foot placement. I can even go into perspective here. make sure it's kind of working. So we're kind of pivoting on that toe. I'm just using the main controller, make sure it's kind of pivoting on that toe. Okay, I was pivoting from the wrong point. I need to pivot between these two. Oh no, that's fine, that's fine. But I need to make sure that this arc makes sense because it's going back in space. So I need to make sure that that's working through here. Cool, that should be working now. Okay, no, it's not at all. We're delaying the toe and then I was leading with the toe. Oh, okay, so I need to lead with the heel. That's dumb. I just didn't do it properly. So I need to put the heel in place and then the toe can catch up. So if I'm delaying with it on this point, I need to be delaying with it on the next point. That's a good lesson learned for anyone. You can't change what you're leading with halfway through the move. I mean, you can, but it's, you know, you need to be doing it for a purpose. So I was leading with the heel there and then I switched to leading with the toe and it felt completely off. So I needed to make sure that I was continuing to lead with the heel during that step. Cool. So we're on 2s. We can put this on a 2 as well. 2, 2, 2. But we need more information in here. So we're going to add the midpoint. And I could add the midpoint on 1s if I wanted to. And actually I will do that. We're going to do it. We're going to have fun. Why am I using an old version of Maya? It's because this is the one that the pipeline that I work with in my job uses, so I just have it installed. I would try out the new versions of Maya if I didn't. Cool, so let's add a midpoint pose, and I'm going to be super snappy with it. I'm just going to add it on a 1 in the middle here. So once again, I'm not going to add space for it. I could if I wanted to, depending on the speed. I'm just going to add it on a 1 in the middle here, and we can determine the arcs and spacing of things. Cool, so what was leading? The arm here was leading. So let's continue that lead and make sure it's pushed during this breakdown. Maybe I can overshoot it here and delay the wrist. I could even delay the fingers if I really wanted to. And it can start to change direction on this point. That's cool. Boom, boom, cool. But now we need to add arcs to everything else. So the head was kind of delayed. So maybe we can arc the head back this way on itself. And then eventually it can catch back up. I haven't really thought about the head arc, but I think that makes sense. Cool, and this arm is going to be in a straight line for this part, so let's put it in an arc. Maybe we can delay things like the wrist during that part and delay the forearm a little bit, so it takes a little bit longer to catch up. And the shoulder maybe can be delayed as well a little bit more throughout these 2 poses. And it will hit its overshoot pose, you know, during the eases. So we haven't had enough information to add that yet, but when we do, it's going to be fun. So maybe the timing change here is going to be too fast, but we'll see. When we add in all the eases and breakdowns and things, we'll see how fast it feels. Maybe we need to add this midpoint on a 2 instead of a 1. We will find out because it'll be very apparent if it's too fast or not. Cool, this foot should be really, during the midpoint, need to push that toe delay, so I'm just going to delay the toe. So there's quite a big spacing here, and then it kind of slows down, so I'm going to make sure that it's mostly getting there. Cool. So we get that little kind of step with the heel leading. Cool, so now we need to add our eases. So let's go back to our post-to-pose workflow thing here. Basically, we've added our 2 main breakdowns and our midpoint, so we've done these steps, and we're going on to adding eases. So that's basically going to determine how we get it out and into the next pose and just add more information to those parts. Cool, let's do it. What are those black and white lines on the manipulators? I'm not too sure what you mean by that. So maybe you could explain. Give me more info. We'll figure it out. Cool. So let's add more eases in here. So we can add ease outs. Our ease out kind of became our first pose of the last one, to be fair. So we don't necessarily need an ease out, but maybe we do. Let's add an ease in for now and see how we do. So we're on 2s and we're being quite snappy, so we can ease in. So now we have a position here where we can add more information into our arcs. Cool. So let's do it. So let's start with the weight this time. I'm not too bothered about what I start with. Let's continue this arc, make sure that it's kind of settling in there. That's cool. We can look at its rotation axes. Make sure that this is somewhat arcing. So I've kind of neglected this so far. Maybe let's see, this arc's kind of coming this way, and then maybe I could delay it a little bit and arc it into the final position. Cool. The arm, let's look at this guy. So it changes direction in here. This is in a straight line again, so maybe we can continue that arc outwards, so it kind of spin, get that nice arc bit. Maybe the wrist is too delayed during this, but we'll see. It's going to be one frame, so it might be okay. Maybe we can delay it a bit more on this frame, so it's kind of arcing. And the shoulder at this point, I think, should start to come down. So I'm just going to have that come down for these 2 frames. So it overshoots and then settles back. Bump, bump. You can see how we're adding more and more info the more keys we add. That's part of this workflow. This guy can be an arc. So it's kind of coming around and settling. Maybe at one point we want it to overshoot. So maybe we can have it overshoot a little bit here, maybe even. So that it kind of clears the other arm over this frame so that you don't see it, which is cool. So it can overshoot and come around, cool. And maybe that means that this frame is the one that the shoulder overshoots on as well, so that we get a nice overshoot on different frames there. Cool, we haven't really looked at the head in a while. Let's see how the head's doing. So the head's going to be going in a straight line in its arc here. So let's continue the arc we were creating. Continue the drag that we had. Arc it around into the next pose. So you can see the more frames we're adding, the more info we're adding. And there's still some stroby stuff because we need more keys to describe how we're getting into this pose, right? So let's add more keys. Let's add more eases. Everything's in a straight line again because we've just used Tween Machine. So we need to put everything into arc. So let's go through one more time. You can start to see how repetitive this is. And by that, hopefully that means it's simple, right? Because you get used to the actions you need to take. And it's all about your decision making during the point where you're doing these actions, right? And that's why it's so beginner friendly. Because you kind of put yourself into this workflow and you get a somewhat decent outcome. So this is in a straight line. We were kind of arcing up and then out and then back around and settling. So let's maybe just look at this manipulator and make sure that it's kind of arcing into that final position. And maybe what we can do is overshoot down a little bit in the forearm here and then settle it. Cool. Maybe that hits a little too hard, but the more keys we add there, we can soften that out. Cool, let's focus on this arm. This arm coming over. So it's going a straight line now. Let's continue it coming over and then it can arc back on itself. And since the wrist was delayed before, maybe we can have that kind of overshoot on this frame. So it kind of overshoots and starts to settle back on itself. That's cool. The head we haven't looked at. So we're just making arcs on everything. So the head, we're going to continue this arc. And you can see how we've added a lot of breakup on different body parts, right? Cool, let's look at, one thing I haven't looked at in a while is the Z of the body. So we do a big spacing in here. Maybe we can pad that out a little bit and then continue it as he settles this way. Cool. It's not the most interesting move in the world, but it's got some fun elements to it. Maybe the neck can overshoot here so that the head kind of dips down and then comes back up. So we have an arc in there. Cool. And now we can keep adding eases to infinity, right? We just add it. The spacing between our final poses is getting less, but because some things are still moving quite a lot, then maybe we need more eases to add more information about how they're settling and their arcs and such. So maybe we can overshoot the wrist here and then it comes back. This guy's going to be in a straight line, so we can continue the arc in, and then it settles. Cool. And yeah, the more keys you add, the more info you're adding into this arc, right? So always straight line. As soon as you use Tween Machine, straight line. Everything's in a straight line. Let's nudge it into an arc. It's going to come around. Nice. We look at the rotation. straight line here. So I'm just going to nudge it very slightly up so it continues its arc. Cool. The knees are a bit poppy, which, you know, is something we can fix later. This spacing here. So one thing I'm noticing with my eyes, so this is something when you get better, you start to notice, the spacing between these two frames and these two frames, it's kind of going and it's kind of speeding up at the end here. So I'm just going to make sure that like the further in we are, the closer to the last pose that we are, the slower things are moving. So that things are slowing down into the last pose. Whereas my spacing was a little bit off there. That's the kind of thing you would get notes on. Yeah, Idris, how you doing, man? Long time no see. Everything's good with me, man. I hope you're good. It's so that you rotate perspective and not a specific axis. Okay, I'm not too sure. I must have missed something in chat there. Yeah, I mean, you can animate just like this in Blender. Axu 2113. So this isn't software specific. If you can use the Blender breakdowner and animate in the exact same way, this isn't tool specific. I've not even touched the graph editor. I've not used any complicated tools apart from Twee Machine, which is just the breakdowner in Blender. So this could be the exact same workflow if you're working in Blender, which is why I don't feel like an imposter putting Blender in the thumbnail. Okay, let's clean up the arc on the head a little bit here. And maybe we can continue the delay on it and it can, can get into that position a bit later. Cool, so you can see how we've really broken up those different parts. Maybe what could be cool here is if we lead with the upper arm a bit more. So if I delay the lower arm and lead with the upper arm and delay the wrist as well, you can start to lead a bit more with the middle of that arm during this breakdown. So now I'm just kind of polishing my blocking, which is a bit dumb, but you know, you can have fun with it. But hopefully you can see how this workflow can be implemented into a bunch of cases. I haven't really looked at the chest at all, so maybe I'll make the chest really big here and just make sure that it's somewhat in arc, because we're going to get weird things like here where it kind of moves and then it gets stuck. So that's definitely not what we want. So I'm just going to make sure that this is arcing nicely. Looks like we were arcing out and around. So out and around, and then, okay, well, we're going to end up here. So maybe I'm doing the arc wrong. Let's work backwards. So we're going to end up here. So the arc can settle in this way. And end up here, the arc settling in this way. So let's work backwards. Cool, and now I'll work forwards again. Just gonna make sure that this arc is kind of making some sense. So this is a bit hard to kind of follow along with, I think. Just me fiddling with stuff. So we'll stop fiddling too much pretty soon and we'll go to big picture stuff. Cool. Yeah, this is moving a bunch now, so let's just set that pose to the exact same. So we fixed up the arc on this pose to pose, but then let's make sure that it's kind of doing something on this pose to pose. So maybe I can delay it, rotation this way, and then have the arc maybe continue and settle in around this way. Right, see that? Which might add a nice little bit of breakup. Cool. So one thing we haven't done is add any moving holds. Because we did that continuous action thing where one move blended into the other, we've not really looked at the moving hold at all, which is a step we talked about in my video. So let's do that now. Let's add a moving hold. Let's say that this animation is 60 frames long. I'm going to cut my timeline to 60 frames. And on my last final ease, which we could still add more eases in here, so maybe we'll do one more. One more ease in. It needs to be on this frame. One more ease in, and I'll quickly make sure that things are in arc. Which is going to be really subtle at this point because we're basically changing like the tiniest thing, but this is in a straight line. So I'm just going to nudge it really subtly. This stuff's kind of in a straight line. I'm just going to continue putting it in arc a little bit. Cool. Let's put this in arc a little bit. Cool. And the rotation is going to be in a straight line between these two. In the middle, I'm just going to nudge it a very tiny bit. The tiniest bit of nudging. This is pretty polishy, but that's fine. So now this pose is going to be off, so I'm just going to set that back to the last pose. And for our moving hold, we're just going to have our last pose ease in to our thing here. And then if I zoom in, you'll be able to see that it's moving very subtly when I flick between these frames. And that way it's not completely held still, which looks terrible in CG. This is moving very slightly. But we also have to add a moving hold at the start. So for this 10 frames that we're not moving, I'm just going to ease out really subtly, just so that there's a tiny bit of something. Some pixels are moving during these frames. So that if we hit spline, things should hold together, please. Let's try it out. I'll save. Drink a bit of water. And let's hit Euler filter as well. Curves Euler filter, some people call it. Americans call it. And let's hit auto tangent. And let's see how well this is held up. Cool. So we have a functional animation here. There is some broken spacing in here. Some things need to be cleaned up for sure. And maybe something for acting. Maybe we haven't really focused on the eyes much here. Maybe for an acting thing, we can try something where we don't need to go. We can just go to normal sized eyes. We can do our blink and ease into normal sized eyes. And maybe we can stay in normal sized eyes for a frame, or maybe on this frame we can really explode them out and he has like a little, oh wow, what's that moment, and then he can go into the next pose. Let's see if that adds. No, okay, we need, if I was to do that I would need more keys, so we're kind of going beyond our workflow here and doing extra stuff. So maybe I would hold the eyes and then overshoot them and then sell them in. So I've added a bunch more keys now, and then this needs to ease in. Okay, well it's just not enough. I haven't got enough information. I'd probably have to add a head accent and all kinds of stuff. We'll just leave it how it was for now. It's just a pose-to-pose exercise. It doesn't need to be perfect. The acting doesn't need to be perfect. There was no planning involved in this animation. So this is kind of easing in now, which is not good. That's not what we want. Just gonna add an extra key in here to fix this arc. Cool. Hopefully you guys can see how that workflow works then, and then we can start answering some questions and start going more in depth on a few topics. Hey dude, how's it going, Thomas? For your arcs, you're also checking every axis in your graph as you build the pose. I never have the graph open when blocking out. Well, I haven't actually looked at the graph editor at all when I'm doing it. I'm just looking how things are in space, and I'm checking for translation. I'm checking the arc of this little manipulator box here. I like to make it big. Some people animate it with it really small, but I press plus to make the axes bigger. I'm checking that this is arcing in translations. So I've got a nice arc here that has good spacing. Things are slowing down and speeding up at the right times. And for rotation, oftentimes I'm checking the intersecting points here between these two axes. It's a bit harder to do in Blender, admittedly, and I know you use Blender. I can make that arc a bit nicer. I think that's a bit too straight. Okay, I'm not fully easing in, so let's just finish that arc nicer. Now I've adjusted the arc. Okay, cool. And then this can be this, and this can ease into this, and that should be fine. Yeah, so that's the two things I'm looking at. Sometimes the manipulator isn't descriptive of the arc. Like during some of these breakdowns, this is going all over the place, but what I'm looking at is the hand, so it's what the rotation is affecting. And that broken joint on fours is kind of nasty. And there's a crazy knee pop in here where the knee goes back on itself and then comes forward. So I can cheat the knee, or maybe I can make the knee... Do they have a stretchy leg? Maybe I can just cheat the knee. Maybe they have a size, like a stretch. Because you can see basically what's happening in this spacing is the knee. Oh wow, that's huge. Why did it get so big? The knee is going back on itself and then popping forward, so that's causing a pop. So I can use the little IK knee here to fix that, although it's going to be a bit gross. So let's try it out. It might be a bit gross. The IK knee on this guy is not well skinned. The spacing might not pop as much. Let's maybe turn it down a little bit. Cool, it doesn't pop as much. It's still not nice, but you know, we're not going for perfect polished animation here. You haven't animated in Blender in a while. He's been converted. Here he is. Cool, guys. So let me know if you have questions about that, because we just went through the whole thing. Just wanted to say that PDF can be zoomed in on small PDF website immediately. There you go. Small PDF website. Danish Khan, my guy, or gal. Thank you very much. Interesting to see how people approach animation. Of course, yeah, animation's great. Animation's super interesting. There's loads of workflows, but I think this one's super useful for beginners. I don't wanna break this joint as much. I don't think. Maybe that's causing issues, but whatever. Cool. Does anyone have any questions? And if not, we have some more topics to go on to. Side note on spacing. Yeah, I might have to explain spacing a little bit more, because it's such a big topic, but it's something you need to have a good foundation in. For all of animation, really. Yeah. Cool. So let's think about spacing real quick. Let's just look at the left and right of this guy. So by eye, I've made this relatively decent. I mean, the spacing could probably be a bit better if this was maybe held back a bit and then it was a bit faster through the middle. Like these are things that then I can go in and clean up, right? So after this workflow is done, I have relatively clean graphs. I mean, if I look at some of this stuff, it's relatively clean, but then you end up with some stuff like this where, oh, okay, maybe this could ease in a bit tighter so that this curve is a bit nicer. Maybe you could even use some tangents, you know. You can always offset keys as well. This is a bit linear. This is a bit in the middle and linear, so I can make a decision whether I'm easing in or out. Maybe I'll decide to ease in. And you can see how, you know, even though we just used our eye, our graphs are pretty clean. And, you know, you can clean that stuff up if you want to. About my other workflow, my secret workflow, the one I'm not teaching you. The other workflow is just going into Spline earlier, but basically it just requires more understanding of how this translates to the graph editor and how things are working. Basically, it's not as simple, it's not as easy for beginners, and it's not as formulaic. And as such, I think it's more difficult to learn. One thing in spacing that isn't working right now, I just want to fix. Let's look at this guy, because this is definitely broken. Oh, this is unstepped. Okay, let's make sure. Oh, it's because I set an extra key. It's because I'm breaking this joint that I'm having this issue with this thing leading. That would work in stepped, but not in spline. That's the reason that this continuous action is not working, and the spacing here is not very good. So maybe I don't break the joint. Breaking the joint was fun, but maybe that's messing it up. Maybe we just don't. And instead we delay and drag the arm, and we just drag it as we go. And then eventually it can catch up. Cool. I don't know why I'm using 2 axes here. That's not good animation, but oh well. Cool, so we continued one thing into the next move. It's not working perfectly because it drifts for so long, but we could tighten that up if we wanted to. And the hand rotation is snapping across these frames and then not continuing to drag. Anyway, I'm getting polishy on an animation that's not supposed to be polishy. The whole point is to practice the workflow and not to worry about the polish too much. Cool, questions. How does your workflow if you have less frames or have more frames in between from A to B? In 3 frames or B in 20 frames? Yeah, so the more frames you have, the more slow it can be, I guess, right? Like if you have less frames and you need to get between your poses in that amount of time, you just make it snappier. And sometimes if you're really snappy, your spacing, you might have to add smear frames or that kind of stuff, depending on how cartoony you're going, right? I'm just gonna fix the spacing. Keep fiddling. This is the thing with animation, you end up fiddling forever. So yeah, if you have less frames, you just make things snappier. So by snappier, I mean you just snap between the poses more and you make sure that the spacing is broken down between, and you have those arcs kind of worked out and that sort of thing. Did I miss anything else? Just want to say hello. To me, you're clearly one of the best on YouTube. Your workflow is amazing. Well, thank you. That's very nice of you. How's it going? Nice to see you guys in here. Please, hi, thanks for what you do. Please, how do you animators know when to hold a frame when using life reference? Cool, we're gonna go into reference in a minute. Do you block in spline sometimes? Yeah. I mean, you could use this workflow in spline and it shouldn't be an issue. I mean, you've seen how it kind of works, but sometimes, especially for beginners, I think it's harder to see through the muck, like the mushiness of things moving. I think it's a lot harder to see through that as a beginner. Maybe I'll just delete this key and it'll be smoother. Sometimes it's hard to see through that as a beginner, and as such you end up, it's just better to work in stepped because of that. But with experience, I mean, I've seen your work, Thomas, and you'd definitely be able to animate in spline and probably not have issues. Do you generally have 3 breakdowns for each pose transition? One pose in, another pose out, and one from midpoint? Yes, exactly. That's what the workflow is. Sometimes, if you're being super snappy, you don't even need to describe the middle point. You can just snap between how you get out of a pose and how you get into a pose. If you're being really cartoony, and maybe you need to add smear frames if you're doing that. Maybe that's something we can do here, is we can add like a really cartoony snappy move. I mean, this is pretty snappy, but maybe we could practice and do like a omega snappy one. Like this is already quite snappy, but we could do a really, really snappy cartoony move in here. And you could see like some smear frames and why you would use them. Cool. And then another thing is, of course, the reference. Am I getting pinged on Discord? Why am I getting pinged on Discord? Was this earlier? Oh my god. Louis, if you're still in chat, who told me there was only 1 N in beginner. There is 2 N in beginners apparently, and I changed the title for no reason. Thanks, Louis. And thanks. Who else is messaging me? E. Thanks, E. Is that Elliot? I think it's Elliot. Can't tell. I have a question. What does graph editor do? So the graph editor is describing what each of these axes are doing. Well, actually, it's describing what the gimbal of those axes is doing. So it's describing all of the movements of these values. Geez, what? So each of these axes. So this is the x-axis here. I don't know what the hell happened. Did I do something to the head? There's some weird spacing at the end there, but it's determining what's happening with each of these axes. So this rotate X on the head is determining how it's looking up and down, for example. And I can just ease this in. And by ease in, I mean between each pose, the space between them, the value is getting smaller and smaller, right? Do you need to use it to animate? Not, well, I mean, to get really polished stuff, yes. But to get to this stage, I've barely used the graph editor, right? If you watch back the stream, I've just done it all by eye. And I didn't really use the graph editor for the first couple of years of animating. I just animated like this. I just used my eye, and it really helped to develop, my animation eye, my ability to see things, and see spacing and that kind of stuff. Right, spacing. That's the one thing I want to quickly talk about. My favorite way to teach spacing is with a cube. Shout out Dan Cripps for his cube demos back in the day. Those were the best. We love those cubes. So let's maybe just look at this cube and isolate everything else. We're just going to make it flat to camera. And we're just going to animate it going left to right over 30 frames. 30 frames. It's just going to go from this point to this point. I have auto key on. It's just going to go left to right. That's fine. Okay, and it's in stepped. But let's just put it in auto because we might be able to teach a bit better. So actually we'll do it in stepped. We'll do the workflow with a cube real quick because I think that's super useful. Louis finally heard me complain about him. I need to change this title now because you've made me spell beginner wrong. Let me type beginner with 2 N's. All right, the title's updated now. I can't believe you made me spell beginner wrong. He's been drinking. How does the pendulum exercise relate to creating in-betweens? Sometimes it's confusing. Can you enlighten us more? The pendulum exercise is teaching you overlap, which is teaching you lead and follow. It's teaching you how one thing is driving the action and another thing is delaying, right? So when I chose lead and follow, human bodies don't work that mechanically. You can lead with the top, You can lead with the bottom and delay like this, or the top like this. It kind of relates to teaching that stuff. I personally don't really like the pendulum exercise for teaching. I understand its value. I think it helps you see in the graph editor what's happening. But I don't know. I think a lot of those exercises are really old school and they're not actually the best. The pendulum exercise is good for learning how tails work and how you can go between C shapes with breakdowns. So let's say the top is leading. We're going to change the top to the... Whoops, let's use a different color. So this is the breakdown. So the top is going to lead between these two poses. This is pose A and this is pose B. And the top is going to lead. So before we are a reverse C shape and we're going to a C shape. So if the top is leading, I can change the top, but let's delay the bottom. So the top is leading, let's change its shape, and the bottom is not. So if you broke down between these, maybe you need a few more breakdowns to get into this pose. But this is basically what it's teaching you, is that something is leading and something is following, and then you get a nice sine wavy animation. For those that know what the hell I'm talking about, that would have made sense, but maybe for a beginner that wasn't clear enough. But hopefully kind of is. No, you spelled beginner, it's beginner. How the hell was it spelled? That is how I spell it, no? Did I do 2 G's? You're trolling me, bro. You're definitely trolling me. Yeah. Also, blame here is correct. The pendulum exercise does get cheesed. You can just offset keys and make it work without actually understanding what you're doing. Whereas if you had to do it in steps, you'd have to make conscious decisions about things. Yeah, you're correct. Spinal auto tangents. Spline gives you overshoots, whereas auto just kind of makes things work to what you've given it. So you make the decisions beforehand when you're blocking, and then you hit auto, and it should work pretty well. Glad you're doing these types of videos and streams. I'm inspired to be a 3D animator and always love animation. Just ordered my animator survival kit book. What else should I learn? Learn a workflow. So learn this workflow if you haven't found a better one that you like. And then you can put all the knowledge that you learn about body mechanics, arcs, how things move, spacing, and you put them into this workflow, and you'll slowly progress over time. Without a workflow, you're just kind of shooting in the dark. And I was speaking to some students the other day at a graduation show about this, but yeah, if you don't have a workflow to follow, you're just shooting in the dark. And when I first started learning animation, it was just so overwhelming because there's so much to it. So if you don't have a structure to put all your knowledge into, you just end up with mush and rubbish. Whereas if you have a workflow, you can at least kind of improve and put things into that workflow over time and get better. What is spline and steps? What do you recommend using? And thank you for answering my questions. Well, as I say, I recommend starting in stepped, just so it's the same as traditional animation, where you add more keys to add more information, more poses to add more information. A pose is kind of like a drawing because it's stamped down. Whereas if it's in spline, you can see between frames, it's kind of mushily moving around. Whereas if it's in stepped, it's stamped down to those keys. So I think it's way easier for beginners to see, visualize, and work that way. How to always be motivated to learn animation and how to not be afraid of failing and ignore animation. Damn, I don't know. Watch Dr. K on YouTube. Dr. K is based. I'm sure he has some stuff about confidence. We love Dr. K. All right, I was going to talk about spacing and I got stuck. Right, so the reason that we make sure that we do things the way we do them, we do our breakdown 1, biasing right side, breakdown 2, biasing left side, the midpoint in the middle, and then eases on either side. The reason we follow this formula is because this gives us progressive spacing, right? So if I put a thing on this, you will see the spacing is getting bigger, apart from the exact middle, because we need to bias one side or the other. Basically, if you use 50%, by default, it's not going to be progressive. So let's do it there. So the spacing gets bigger through the middle and smaller. But if we need to have this for every body part at some point. If it's changing direction, yes, it can slow down and then speed back up again. That's fine. But during our pose to pose move, things need to be, building up speed. This is physics. They build up speed. They get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they start to slow down. I'm not showing enough frames to see the end of this. Here you go. So there's one more here. So in traditional animation, you always see these timing charts drawn. Sometimes they're drawn vertically as well. And that's basically them determining their body parts and what body parts are doing big spacing on what drawings. So on what poses in 3D animation. I just wanted to cover that quickly, but spacing in itself is a relatively big topic. And then breaking up spacing by having different things have different spacing and all these kind of things. And different body parts have different weights to them. So like the head can be way snappier than the body because the body is heavier. Like there's a bunch of stuff to spacing that you can put into your pose-to-pose workflow. But again, we're just trying to focus on the workflow for now. And you can put all the knowledge you learn from all my other videos and all Owen Fernie's other videos and everyone else who watches other videos, and you can put those things into the workflow. So the more you understand about animation, the more you can put it into the workflow, the better work you'll get at the other end of it. And then eventually you can start to experiment with different workflows. But this is a good one for beginners. Stick with it. Hello, Jessa. About leading and drags. How do you decide those things? You already talk about continued action. There's more to consider when we're animating. Is there more to consider when animating? 4K stream. Is it 4K? Let's go. Pog. Hi, Marcus, as well. Sorry, so leading and follow. You just choose something. When you're doing more cartoony stuff, you can choose something. Or when you're doing more realistic stuff, you can look at reference and see what's leading and following. Like mechanically, if you're doing a punch, you probably want to lead with the body before the hand comes through, right? So you get like a whip action, or even the foot turns, the hip turns, the chest turns, the shoulder turns, then the fist, right? So some things that are more mechanical or have more mechanics to it, you're going to look at reference and you're going to figure out what's leading and following. And some things that are more cartoony, you can just have fun with it and you can lead with all kinds of different body parts. And, you know, I can look at, oops, let's hide all that. I can look at some really cartoony stuff. Let's find a cartoony shot I like looking at. What have we got here? Is that cartoony enough? Maybe not. I need something really cartoony. Let's go for, I'm just looking at my folder here. Let's go for the old classic Filthy Hair by Kieran J. Bubbler, which is Omega based. So let's find a pose-to-pose move. So here, let's say. So here, the head and the arm are kind of leading. They are going at the same time, which I've never found anything that I would ever critique about this, but that might be something where you would choose one thing to lead a little bit more than the other. So maybe I would choose the head to lead a bit more or the arm to lead a bit more. But, you know, there's tons of pose-to-pose moves in here which have amazing spacing, and he's leading with all kinds of different things. So the body is leading, well, the head is kind of leading down here, and then the body kind of catches up. So the head spacing is already easing in as the body catches up. Let's find a more cartoony move like this. This is some amazing smear frames. This stuff's so good. So the start of this move, things are easing in. We have some continuous action where the head is continuing and coming around and the hand's starting to pick up. So here the head and the hand once again are leading, and then the head kind of leads and the hand comes down. And then the jaw is even delayed. So you can delay to even different levels of micronism where the top of the head is leading whilst the bottom of the head is dragging. You know, and for the more cartoony you work, you're sunk, you feel but don't see. But when you frame through this kind of stuff, you're like, yeah, this is so good. Like this, the head is really hard leading here. So he's really chose to exaggerate the lead and make it more cartoony for this part. And then the body doesn't really start moving. It has a little bit of movement on the frame that the head is leading, but then it catches back up and the shoulders and everything jiggle. It's just so good. This piece is amazing. Perfecto. Cool. Do I ever work with weighted tangents? Sometimes if I'm being lazy. 1440p. Yeah, that's because my monitor's a 1440p. So yes, 2K for you, Marcus. You got it. Spacing by far the hardest thing for me. I never know where to put breakdowns or eases. Well, following with this workflow, and you'll know where to put breakdowns and eases. You just need to make sure that your arcs are progressively getting bigger and then smaller unless they hit some form of resistance or anything like that. Hello, Carlos. HS. Been following for a while and I've seen your videos and this workflow helped me a lot. Amazing. I've improved in speed and increased a lot. Has been a great help. Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. No worries, buddy. Supak. I watched a lot of that performance video where you did blocking on fours with the rig from Ramon. Yeah. These helped me a lot. Awesome. Pretty much the same workflow, right? Yeah. So that workflow I was using there was pretty much the same. When we get into spline, I start experimenting in that old test that I did. But yeah, the start is basically the same on those videos, on those old blocking live streams, which were a couple years old now. How would you do the pose-to-pose workflow for a walk cycle? I would view the key poses or the held poses, the extremes, as the ups and downs of the cog. So you're going between the ups and downs, and then you just do breakdowns for the contact and the, I guess contact would be the breakdown after between the up and the down, and the passing position would be the breakdown between the down and the up. But I'd probably just do one breakdown and then go like that. A little bit different, one breakdown instead of two breakdowns. But yeah, it's a similar thing in general. It's all animation. I just want to thank you so much for the resources you post, starting from my uni character animation program this August. It's been so helpful and informative. Wow, you're well ahead of the crowd. I didn't learn animation until I was very much into university, so, and even didn't really learn it till afterwards, to be honest. So, awesome. Cool. So we haven't talked about reference. Let's talk about reference. That's the one other thing I really want to get onto before the end of the stream. So, yeah, we've talked about spacing and making sure that there's not little hitches in it. Well, that's one thing to make sure. Things need to always be getting either bigger or smaller. If there's hitches in it for no reason, sometimes having a hitch can add a bit of texture if you know what you're doing, or if there's a thing that is hitting and then pushing through, maybe there would be a spacing slowdown and then push off. Like, there's tons of reasons why you might use this, but in general, especially when you're a beginner, just view it as the spacing needs to always be getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then smaller and smaller and smaller until you settle into your final pose, right? And then this is just saying when you use Tweet Machine, it puts things in a straight line, so you need to put it into an arc, which we've covered infinite times, over and over and over. Cool. Let's hide this. Sorry, we don't need to watch Owen's video. Let's put that in white. There you go. You can't see it anymore. JK, you should watch Owen's video. Let's link Owen's video. Owen deserves the shout out. Owen Fernie. He changed his thumbnail and everything. Complete guide to reference for feature animation. This is going to be your bread and butter. This is a fantastic resource about using video reference, and you could use this workflow alongside this as well. So I'm going to put that in here. Shout out Owen. But using reference. So let's pull up some reference, which I should have prepped some reference. God damn, I didn't. I'm stupid. Let's find something from some of my old classes with some of my students. I'm sure I've used reference for that. 1 second. Mentoring. Who would I have used reference with? Okay, cool. So we have some reference. Nice. Let's just cut it off here. Boom, boom, boom. Cool. This is a relatively simple move, so it's easier to break down. Sometimes moves are way harder to break down. And let's see what Asembo is telling me. Mr. Michael Bristol. Hitches or slip in the leg. After squishes or punches, body mechanics, where you lead with the leg. Looks and feels really nice. Yep, for sure. Cool, let's look at this and let's draw over it. And maybe we can make this bigger. And let's talk about where our poses in this workflow would be. Because there's a few important things. And this is, I find it easier to break down mechanic stuff for reference, and we'll talk about acting. Kind of separate how I might break those things down. Owen talks about this in his video as well, so definitely check it out. Cool, so the things I would look for my held poses. So when I'm talking about held poses, I'm talking about our golden poses in the workflow video, or key poses sometimes referred to. So the things we're looking out for when we're looking at mechanics are the extremes of the weight. So luckily with this reference resource, this is Motion Actor Inc., they're fantastic. We can look at like the line here, you know, this is literally showing us the extremes of the weight. And we're looking for held poses as well. So our first pose would be this one, because, you know, there's nothing else happening. This is the first frame, so we need to put a key here to show what's happening. And the weight is here. Can I make this smaller? Right click, let's make it really small. It's not letting me. Let's go really small. Let's go small. Cool, so this is a key. So the next key, I'm gonna look for where the peak of the up here is. So I can look at this red line, and the frame where it changes direction for the first time is here. So this would be a key that I'm working into and out of, right? So we have this little hop. This would be my key. And we have the down here. where we hit our extreme here. So this is the extreme where we hit the bomb. This would be my next key from the reference. These would be the things I'd be taking. And then I'd be using the workflow to break down between these. But I'd also be using the information given from the reference in different cases. So we'll talk about that as well. So these are my 3 keys. Let's just do these 3 keys for now and talk about a few things. So when we're doing our breakdown 1 and our breakdown 2, you know, I would probably put it around here. Maybe this would be our breakdown 1. You can see that the arms are leading. And if we flick between these, we can see kind of the weight is kind of dragging. The weight is kind of going down a little bit. It's kind of hard to see, but the weight is kind of going down a little bit. So that would be the thing that was dragging. Okay, it's right clicking for some reason. So this would maybe be our breakdown 1. And when we're getting towards getting into our final pose, maybe this would be like our breakdown 2, right? So we're getting into that final pose, things are easing in. We have the arms still leading. We have the body catching back up, and we have the feet pushing off. So these are all bits of information we would need. Here, we would have some continuous action, of course, because this is a continuous action where some things would continue to move, like the arms and the body and everything, really, because it's a continuous move. Maybe we would put our first breakdown here, breakdown 1. And maybe here we'd put, so here, breakdown 1, we have a contact, right? So this is something we definitely need to make sure is in our animation. If we don't have that, it'll be super floaty. And for our breakdown 2, we could do it on our second contact maybe here, or we could go a little bit later and we could add that contact into the midpoint pose. So we need to make sure we add contacts. So they need to come at some point during the workflow, they need to show up the contacts. So it could either be in your breakdown 1, it could be in your midpoint, it could be in your breakdown 2, it could be in any of your eases. But you need to make sure that those things are in there at some point. Otherwise things are going to be floaty. These are the things that need to be pulling from the reference. So I can put my breakdown 1 and 2 just kind of where the general move is easing in and out. So maybe this would be my breakdown 2 and all this would be eases, or maybe that's a bit early. I don't know. Maybe it could be a bit later. But hopefully you can see how we're kind of going between held pose to held pose. All of this would be eases. And then the next extreme would be the top of the weight here. So this is our next key here, our next golden pose. And we'd probably do our breakdown 1 somewhere in here where you can see how things are coming out of the first pose. And we'll do our breakdown 2 somewhere in here where you can see how things are getting into our next pose. And then in the middle, we would have a midpoint. And maybe in the midpoint, we can have the last frame of contact, right? So this time, the contact falls on the midpoint. That's the last frame of contact. So that would be the midpoint. And we have our breakdown 2, right? So these are the keys we're putting in. So we have our key, breakdown 1, midpoint, breakdown 2, key. And then we add eases around those to pad out and add more information. Do you kind of see how the workflow translates into mechanics using this? This is a very clear example because the extremes are very easy to see. But this is how you would translate your animation work, your breakdowns into your... This is how you would take the info from the reference and put it into your animation. And I've made a video on this exact topic. So for those asking, you got to check out the channel, guys. There's already videos. There's already banger videos that exist. Like, they're not as well edited, admittedly, but there's banger videos on the channel. You got to check them out. All right, let's, there you go. And I will link this video. So this is my video on using reference, but this is kind of only relevant for body mechanics reference. Acting reference, we're going to get onto in a second. That's a little bit different. Have I missed any questions during this? Hey, actually, what projects have you worked on? Any movies or TV shows? Yes, I've worked on Despicable Me 4, which is coming out next year. Scrooge: A Christmas Carol, which was a Netflix film, which came out 4. I'm working on a game currently. I worked on some TV shows here in the UK. I worked on a Playmobil web series, Go Jetters, which is a TV show in the UK, Number Blocks, which is a TV show in the UK, Dennis and Nasher Unleashed, which is a TV show here in the UK, a bunch of ads, and a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, worked on lots of things. I've been working professionally for 6 years. Hi Chester, you are my mentor. Yes, let's go. Cool reference. It is a good reference. Here for the bromance between Chester and Owen. Nah, that doesn't exist. The Chester Owen law does not exist. Who is Owen? Yeah, exactly. I don't know who that is. Yo, Idris. Just wonder, do you do any practice every week for your skill in animation, although you're already really good in it? And what kind of practice you have keep doing until now? Yes, so the kind of pose to pose move that I did right here, I would do as a practice. When I was first learning and I was learning TV, I would just do little moves like this. Like just a couple pose-to-pose moves. Doesn't need to be perfect. I would only get this far and I would move on to the next animation. And that's what was great about working in TV as my first job was you would just get your reps in. You would just do pose-to-pose move over and over and over. And I did that for 2 years. And I learned so much from doing that. And I had great people surrounding me who taught me and helped me learn a bunch. So just doing little exercises like this where I've just done a little pose-to-pose move and practiced. Like it's not perfect. There's issues with it. I could clean it up. I could polish it. I could make the acting better. Like the acting is not really what I'm focusing on here. It's just the workflow. And I think it's easier to isolate practicing the workflow than practicing like a whole personal project. If you want to make a showreel piece, then yeah, then you need to start thinking about the acting and the performance and a bunch of other things. But for just practice, like pose-to-pose little practices, like getting to this stage where you can just make things get between poses is like 70% of getting a job in like TV as like a beginner, as a junior, right? Having poses explained in weight and contacts actually explains why these lines are so helpful on her little suit. Yes, they're very helpful. Does a lot more than illustrate from me now. Awesome. That's so cool. Thank you. Hey bro, I just want to know how the situation about 3D animation in the industry is good or bad. Right now there's issues with visual effects, especially because of the writer and actor strikes, which are causing some issues with like roles opening up. I'll open the window. But yeah, I'm luckily more experienced, and as such, is the more experience you have, the easier it is to move between jobs, sadly. So it's really hard to get in, but once you do it, you know, you can progress and that sort of thing. Cool. Did I ever tweet that we're live? I never tweeted that we were live, but okay, I tweeted earlier. I had a whole tweet planned. Look at this. And we are live. Head over to YouTube now. I never tweeted this. I just went live and then dealt with technical issues for 15 minutes. How long does it take with these pose-to-pose practices? I would spend, you know, a couple hours, an hour, a couple hours. I would just, you know, what's good is if you make sure that there's at least 2 pose-to-poses in your little practices like this, so that you can practice things like continuous action, where one thing comes through a pose and then leads to the next thing. That's really good to practice. So make sure that there's at least 2 pose-to-pose movements in your practices. Do you have maybe a video available? How does your critique look like for your mentor program? I do not actually have anything right now, which I probably should. But I have been teaching for a while privately, students. The video reviews will basically be in-depth feedback, where I'll go into your Maya scenes and I'll poke around at stuff and I'll give you critique, and I'll go into Sync Sketch. I'll do draw overs and explain concepts for you. I'm also super open to like messaging outside of the videos during the number of sessions that you pay for. But yeah, if you have more questions about it or are unconfident and want more details, like you can message me about it, you can email me about it, and we'll discuss more. Because that's something I'd love to get going. I really like Jean-Denis Huss's model, where he has his workshop students, which are people that pay for video reviews from him, and he gives lots of feedback. I would do the same. I would just focus more on things like workflow and things like how you can improve following these steps, which is a bit more granular and maybe more helpful depending on if you like the way I learn, the way I teach. Question: movie animation and TV animation tend to have different styles. For example, TV is more snappier. Do they do a workshop in TV to help you adjust to their style? In TV, they just have to accept what you give them because they don't have enough time to change everything over and over. In film, they have a lot more budget, and as such, you can just keep redoing shots until you hit the style that's correct. And over time, you get enough notes and you get enough feedback from people that you start to understand the style of the show you're working on more and more until you need less notes later in the production. So usually, for me at least, I get better at the style of the show later into the production, during the production cycle of, you know, how long a film is, a year, or how long a TV show is, you know, also probably a year. What's your opinion on the biggest posing mistakes beginners make? I made a video on posing. God damn, check out the channel, guys. We love the channel. I did a live stream where I was teaching a student. Here you go. Someone was asking about how I teach earlier. This isn't a video review, but this is a live recording. I was helping out your boy Adam. Shout out Adam to Tunji, my guy. where he gave me some poses and I went in and pushed them for like 3 hours straight and talked about how to push poses and make stuff more appealing. So check out that one on posing. What I don't talk about too much on that is how poses work together, which is the kind of thing I tried to talk about a little bit earlier with contrast and that sort of thing. I feel like maybe wasn't super clear with it. But yeah. I'd pay testers to have casual chats. You should be paying me, Peter. No, I'm joking. You make great scripts and we need them in the community. Is there a specific workflow to animate hair or clothes? To be honest, it's kind of the pendulum. It's kind of the C curve to C curve thing that we were talking about, where you lead one side and delay another side as the breakdown, and then you work between these back and forth. Yeah. That's that hair and cloth. That's hair and cloth. It's easier to describe in 2D than 3D because you have to deal with a lot of controls to get this kind of stuff. There are some scripts for overlapping as well, which can be time saving, but understanding the principle behind it before using those scripts is good, because otherwise you're just kind of cheating. And you won't know when something's wrong if you're just cheating, because you won't have the fundamental understanding. HS, when the next animation challenge? I love that, really fun. Oh man, I used to really like doing the animation challenge live streams. I'd like to get back into it. This is the first stream I've done in over a year and a half, I think. I've been very busy boy. Oh, and Aaron's here. Hey Aaron, man, how you doing? Hey Chester, where's your OnlyFans? Much love. You see me in real life, Louis. You know you don't need an OnlyFans, all right? Do you intend to go back to doing frequent live? You know what? I've really enjoyed this, and this is the most viewers I've had on a live stream ever, probably. So yeah, I mean, it seems to be YouTube live streams seem to be pretty good. People seem to be interested. The thing with animation live streaming is, unless you have like an idea of something to animate or you set yourself a challenge, it's kind of difficult to, it's difficult to come up with stuff to do. And also it can burn you out. Like I'm going to be burnt out after this. Talking for a couple hours straight and using my brain to try and explain things is definitely going to burn me out. Yes. Awesome. Okay, I haven't talked about acting yet. So we talked about how to get poses from body mechanics reference, and we're using the ups and downs of the body. You can also use the left and rights of the body. Owen's video about reference, he talks about this a little bit as well. But if there were held poses where it was more apparent that the weight was going side to side instead of up and down, then I would put my keys on the extremes of the weight to the left and the right rather than the ups and the downs. But obviously with this one, it's very up and down. So the ups and downs are where I'm putting my keys and my breakdowns and such. For acting, it's a little bit more difficult. I don't know if I have anything acting-y reference-wise I can pull up. Maybe, I can pull up some old, some stuff from old projects and talk about it. So let's do that. Let's find some of my reference from some of my old projects. Do I have reference? Reference. Let's look at this guy.
In my power to help him, I beg of you.
Here he is. His slightly bulkier Chester when I was a little bit heavier and actually went to the gym.
I swear to honor Christmas in my heart and keep it there the whole year through. I will learn from the past, live only in the present, and strive for a better future.
Cool. So let's look at the last one because it's the most broad. Maybe to its detriment. Maybe the acting could have been a bit more subtle, but the keys, it's difficult because I'm stepping back. The mechanics are going to take precedence sometimes, and the acting is going to take precedence other times out of the things I'm taking from the reference. But let's zoom into this reference since this is the one that I used for the shot, and let's talk about it. Cool. So obviously I would probably set a key for the first one just because you need that in general. I'm using this to draw, whereas I should be using this. Okay, cool. Key. So this would be a key because it's the first frame and we need that. Next thing. So I'm looking for... Probably at this point I would use my mechanics to determine. So I would look for held poses. And all of this would be as part of the breakdown. And I'd probably get to this point where the pose is kind of holding for a little bit. So I'm looking for held poses mostly. And then I'm looking for like any acting beat as well on top of that. That's the difference with acting. So these might be my key poses. And then like this down here where things are delaying, this is kind of an anticipation, but it's part of the key. I mean, this could technically be another key where we break down into this one and then out of this one into this one, right? So that could probably be the case where we break down into this one, or this could be just part of the breakdown. It depends. I think this would probably be part of the breakdown. That's probably how I did it. So this could maybe be our breakdown 1 using this workflow that we've been going over. And like in here, maybe this would be our breakdown 2 as we're getting into our second pose. But there's an important piece of information here, which is this fun little overshoot with the arms. So because of that, I will make sure that my mid pose, my midpoint pose is getting that information in there. I just need to make sure that like the important parts of information are hitting one of the steps of the workflow. That's the important thing. And then all of this would just be eases. And yeah, I would probably have a key here where my weight goes all the way to the side. So I have an extreme in the weight shift. So this might be, not a B, that would be a K for a key, for a main key pose, golden pose. And then, you know, this would probably still be eases from the previous pose. And all of this texture would be layered in. And I would just have to do breakdowns between this stuff. So it's a bit more subtle, but, you know, maybe here could be our breakdown 1 and in here could be our breakdown 2 where we have this slight kind of down in the arc of the body. So we have a key, breakdown 1, breakdown 2. So how we're getting in and out of poses. And I would start exaggerating the lead and follow of things as well, and break away from real life a little bit. Chester is jacked. How much do you bench? I'm sure I benched more at this point. I'm sure at this point I benched more than Owen Fern. Now it's a bit more questionable. Owen Fernie might bench more than me. Hey, Chestershire, do you prefer cable curls or preacher curls? What gives you the best pump in your big arms? I just like dumbbell curls, Cal. I just like dumbbell curls, okay? I wanted to learn creature animation, sir. Can you make creature animation tutorial? I'm sure there are much better people than me, like Owen Fern, actually, who's been doing a lot of creature lately to do creature stuff. I've not actually done any creature stuff professionally apart from side characters in TV and such. I might have some creature work coming up, actually, but we'll see. Cool. So hopefully you're seeing I'm just going between held pose to held pose and then making sure as part of those breakdowns or midpoint poses that we're hitting important points of information. So this breakdown 2 would probably also be the contact of this leg. You can't see it, but I think you can feel it. From that point, I've taken the weight on that leg and then my weight shift continues over, you know. So just like with the mechanics, we're adding in stuff. This shot is kind of mechanics heavy, so I'm thinking more about the mechanics than the acting. Maybe I should have found a shot that's more... All of these shots might be kind of mechanics heavy. This first one might not be. Okay, let's look at this first one and talk about acting beats a little bit and what you would take from reference. Cool. Which of these did I use? I used number 3. Let's look at number 3. Cool. Number 3. So yeah, the first frame is definitely going to be a key. We all know this. We know that first frames are keys because you need that information. I might have this as a held pose. We kind of hold in it and then work our way back out of it. So this is kind of a held pose. So this would be a key and we'd break down into it and out of it. This kind of gesture here would be a key and I would work in and out of that. So these are important acting beats, you know. It's not necessarily my weight hitting its extremes. It's more about the acting beats at this point. And then, you know, we have this overshoot and settle. And our weight drifts over. So maybe this would be a big key here and we just need to work into it. Maybe there'd be another held pose in between these two because there's quite a big gap. Whoops. So this kind of anticipation would probably just be like a breakdown, like breakdown 1 or something. And then maybe you'd have a breakdown 2 on the overshoot here. And then all of this stuff could probably just be eases. So we have breakdown 1, breakdown 2, and our midpoint would probably be the down of the arm here. So we don't want to miss this important part of information. It needs to be part of the workflow. So it needs to be in there somewhere. It needs to be either one of our breakdowns, one of our eases, or our midpoint, right? So this is our midpoint. So we just need to make sure that we get those important parts into our workflow, but we're working between held poses just like you would without reference. We're just using, guideposts in our reference to get us there. Is that clear with the kind of difference between acting and mechanics? The way I view it's kind of similar. I know Owen Fernie's video goes into this in depth, so I've definitely checked that out as well. But that's kind of how I would use this post-to-pose workflow, but with reference. And hopefully that's clear, and we can stop talking about my arms, which are now smaller. Oh shit, I zoomed in. Fuck the camera up. That's fine. Cool. All right, well, that's most of the stuff I wanted to cover. How long have we been going for? We've been going for, I don't know, how long have we been going for? 2 hours, 30 minutes? No. An hour 56, I think. Is that correct? An hour 56. That's pretty good. A 2 hour stream's pretty good. I've been watching previous streams of my first live one. Welcome. Checks me M1NT. Mint. Checks me Mint. My guy. Welcome. Or gal. Bench collab soon. Yeah, me and Owen need to do an IRL 1 rep max live stream. I need to take more creatine to catch up to Owen. And Owen's doing cats. Owen loves cats. Cats the musical. Bench pressing your limits. Yeah, it's like Goku and Vegeta, you know. Owen's definitely Vegeta. I'm definitely Goku, you know, because I'm taller. So yeah. If you lat spread, do you look like a bat? No. My lats are actually quite weak, sadly. My calves, though. These calves, though. You ever seen big calves? So yeah, hopefully this goes pretty in depth for you guys on the post-to-pose workflow. You can watch this alongside the other video and you can see the steps I'm taking, and you can also see the things that I kind of missed out, like continuous action and other stuff. This isn't a perfect animation I created today, I just did it on the fly, but you can see hopefully how those things were implemented and how the things from the video, which is kind of a summary, were implemented. And hopefully you can also see how you can take the important parts from your reference whilst using this workflow. Even for moves which are continuing in action, you just have things continue between the two poses, like we just had this arm, which takes over. Cool, I'll give it a minute for any more questions. I mean, we've got a lot of people in here still, so... Too camera shy to create my own reference, even though those would be most beneficial. I'll give it a try tomorrow. Yeah, dude, I mean, I really like the point Owen was making in his video, where he was saying, if you're going to do reference, it's kind of more embarrassing to show reference where you're being shy and not just going all out, than if you're just doing reference and going all out, right? Like, it's just as embarrassing to show something that's bad reference than good reference, so you may as well try, you know? Like, it's, I think that's a good mental thing, which I liked. Not Shortster. Owen Shorty, not Owen Fernie. Thank you for doing this. Great way for someone not formally educated to learn. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I was formally educated, but I was never really given a workflow when at university. I was just taught lots of loose principles, and through having a workflow, I finally had a way to put that stuff in. Shout out Anim Dojo, which is an old animation web learning resource website, which I did a course with years back, where I learned a bunch of these techniques. My variation of the workflow is a little bit different. It's a bit closer to Dan Cripps' workflow, who's a animation supervisor at Blue Zoo. But then I also have a few different steps to him now. But yeah. Fitness YouTuber arc when? Yeah, maybe we should do fitness videos, huh? Aaron's gonna stream soon. Aaron, if you streamed, I could link over 50 people. Actually, it's 47 now. God damn. As soon as I looked at the other screen, 3 people left. That's depressing. Thank you. Hope you will stream a lot more. Yeah, it was good fun. I 1v1 ceiling reach. The streams are the reason I'm subscribed. Damn, are the videos not good enough for you? Shit, I've been putting effort into the videos, but why stream on YouTube over Twitch? Because I have over 5 times more people following me on YouTube than Twitch now. So I think streaming on Twitch is kind of pointless for me when I have way more stuff on YouTube. Also, it automatically uploads the VOD to YouTube. I'm going to cut out stuff. Oh, there's an ad in 40 seconds if you guys want to wait around for an ad. The YouTube thing has popped up telling me an ad will play in 40 seconds. I guess I will let the ad play, and then I'll answer any final questions after that, and then go. Thanks for sharing your techniques. When is the next live session? I don't know, but maybe we'll do some live animation stream where we do a little challenge or something, because they're always good fun. It's crazy that this workflow wasn't taught in university, or my university I think we're referring to. Regardless, great that you've learned it and are sharing the knowledge. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much, young head, my guy. Anim Dojo site is not working. Yeah, Anim Dojo doesn't exist anymore, sadly. All right, you guys are getting sent to an ad. Stick with it. You'll be back in a second. Any chance to do live critique here and there? I wouldn't do it on a live stream. I have done it on live streams before, but honestly, it's not good content. No one wants to watch other people's reviews. I think there's some value in watching other people's reviews, but it's just kind of not. Yeah, it's just not good content, man. Cool. I'll watch the ad for you. Thank you. Everyone watch the ad and click on the ad, and then I get money. Shalom going to the gym. He's getting big. He's gonna feature in the bench press competition soon. Yeah, Aaron, you're saying about streaming on YouTube. Yeah, man. I don't know. It's been good today. I mean, I've got more viewers than I had on Twitch, so. I mean, that's just because the video's done well, I think. Helpful stuff, man. No, I don't think I will. Okay, Bishop King. I don't know what that was in reference to. No worries. Unlucky to Owen. Yeah, Owen's an unlucky guy. He's got to drive minibuses into King's Cross, you know. It's difficult. All right, guys. What's the time? 7:34. So I've been going for 2 hours now, which I think is a good time to wrap up. I don't imagine that I will have many more questions. And as such, we can probably head off. I think this is a good resource. Maybe I can edit this down, but I think maybe I'll just have the live stream upload and that sort of stuff. Here's the question. For heavy body mechanic shots that require flipping, how do you avoid gimbal locks? You need to make sure that your rotation order is correct for a rotation going this way. But also it's kind of difficult, and sometimes you just have to massage things on ones. I mean, there are ways of doing it, but it's kind of difficult. There's videos where people make like group locators over the top of things, and you have like a control which resets, and then another control takes over for the flip, which has a separate rotation order, and then it gets to the point where it gets to 0 again, and the other one takes over. It's a whole thing. I think Alessandro Compale, easy in, easy out, my guy, has a video on gimbal lock that's pretty good, so check him out. Not everyone here might like. No, they'll love the Aaron Baker stream. Everyone go to the Aaron Baker stream if he starts streaming. So much making good video. No worries, dude. Successful user regime. Yes, it was. All right. Euler filter, gimbal rotation. Yep. You got it, Usman. You know what's up. Cool. All right, guys. We'll call it there. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, it's been fun. I like streaming. Streaming fun. I've not done streaming in a long time, but I do enjoy it. So maybe more streams in the future, especially if we get an average of 50 people like we did today. That's crazy. 50 people at once. And I didn't even tweet when I started live. I tweeted hours ago. Also, looks like some people checked out my Ko-Fi. Oh yeah. Also, before I go, final thing. If you want to learn from me and you want to pay me money, if you want to pay me money to teach you animation, where I give you video reviews with lots of drawovers, and I'll go into your Maya scenes and fix things up and point out the things that are wrong with your work. If you like the way I teach, it's going to be just as casual and just as fun. Check out my Ko-Fi, because you can commission me now for live animation reviews. Aaron's going to stream soon. Awesome. 3D generalist, what should I focus on to get work ASAP? Probably a specialty. Or look at small companies, because bigger companies only really hire specialists. All right. Thanks for streaming a lot. Useful information. All right, guys. Gamers. Yeah. Check out the Ko-Fi. We'll make a Discord maybe one day. All right. How do I end this damn thing? Stop streaming. All right, games. Gamers, I'll see you next time.